outstanding debt and no active finance development agreements. This TID district does donate $400,000 a year to TID 13. And we anticipate this one will be open for another year or two, and our goal is to hopefully close it a year early. TID 7 is along the 27th Street corridor, going down from about Elm Road up to Drexel Avenue. It was created in 2007 with a mandatory termination date in 2027. This one, its expenditure period closes on April 17th of 2022, so we got about 6 months. And that means we can't incur any new expenditures, enter into new finance development agreements after that time period. You'll see the increment generated is about $85,500,000. And a lot of that value has come in the last 2 to 3 years. The development of that Seasons of Orchards Hill project added significantly to the tax base. So it has a fund balance right now about $50,000, outstanding debt about $5.8 million, and it has one active finance development agreement. The positive of this district is that with that significant increment growth in the last few years, it's able to service some debt that's associated with improvements to Drexel and 27th Street intersection, as well as the Drexel interchange. So that was previously on just the city's debt service levy. So this TID's able to service that now, which is a great news story. TID number 8 is our OP Business Park on the south side, created in 2009. Mandatory termination date in 2029. It does have some remaining acres to be developed, but as you'll see, significant increment again generated in the last 3 to 4 years as we've incented some projects in that industrial park. The increment is about $103 million, which is excellent. As you'll see, it does have a negative fund balance of about $820,000. Certainly, as the city had to invest in some of the public infrastructure up front, we're recuperating that back. Our cash flow shows it should be positive by the end of 2022, so about a year from now. And then it does have outstanding debt of about $9.5 million and 2 active finance development agreements with Stella and Chewy's. And the way we have the debt structured on this, we would anticipate this district will either go to full term or maybe be able to close about a year or two early. So it really depends on kind of some of the construction activity in the pipeline. Next is TID 10, which encompasses the Master Lock campus, created in 2010, mandatory termination date in 2030. You'll see increment of about $22 million, fund balance of about $940,000, no outstanding debt. It does have one active finance development agreement with Master Lock. That's a pay-as-you-go incentive, so we have a few years left on that. I believe anticipating that agreement would wrap up in either 23 or 24. So certainly this is a district that has the capacity to be a donor to others, as well as potential for early closure. TID number 11 is Drexel Town Square, created in 2012. Mandatory termination in 2032. Increment of about $184 million. So our largest increment generating TID district. You'll see a positive fund balance, about $660,000. It does have some pretty significant outstanding debt at about $44.5 million. A lot of that being for the public infrastructure, environmental cleanup, things of that nature in the vicinity, as well as incentives related to finance development agreements. Based off the cash flow projection, this one would probably go out to the full term of 2032, but it's in a very good position. You can see some pretty significant increment generated in the last year or two. So it's really on the right track now, which is great. TID number 12 is the IKEA TID district. So abutting the interstate on both the east and west sides, as well as Drexel Avenue. Created in 2016, mandatory termination date in 2036. It does have increment generation of about $57 million so far. Fund balance of about $2.5 million at the end of fiscal year 20. Outstanding debt about $6.8 million. We have 3 active finance development agreements there, as well as some projects in the hopper. TID 13 is our lakefront district, created in 2017. It is a blighted district, so it has a little bit longer runway of 27 years. So its termination date, mandatory termination date, is 2020 or 2044. Current increment generation is 765,000. So hasn't seen that development activity as of yet. However, we do have recently approved finance development agreement with F Street Group for construction of the Lakeshore Commons project, which has anticipated equalized value, I think 150 million, 160 million. So pretty significant project over time. Current fund balance is about 240,000. We don't have any outstanding debt as of yet. We will in the next few years as we put in the public infrastructure for that development. TID 14 is at the corner of 6th Street and Roxon, and this is a single parcel district. Again, a blighted district created in 2018, really to do environmental remediation on the site. It does have building on it now, valued at just under $9 million. Small negative fund balance. We do have a pay-as-you-go incentive, a little bit of debt that was provided up front. On the incentive, fund balance should recover in the next, looks like year or two, but certainly not of concern at this time. TID 15 is Drexel Avenue and 6th Street. So cross Drexel Avenue from Drexel Town Square. Again, created in 2018 as a blighted district. So it has a 27-year runway, mandatory term date in 2046. Value is about 4.5 million, and fund balance again about negative 16,000. It does have a pay-go. We anticipate that turning positive in the next few years as well. No outstanding debt. And then lastly is TID 16, which is the Ryan Business Park, which was created in 2018 as a mixed-use district with a mandatory termination date in 2038. You'll see increment generation of 177 million. So performed excellently. I think the initial projection was 120 million, 130 million. So value came in well above that. You'll see positive fund balance, about 110,000. We do have an active finance development agreement with both the business park as well as the developer of the actual facility. One was an upfront issuance, and we have outstanding debt of about $2 million for that. And for the actual construction of the facility, we have a pay-go. But again, because it's overperforming very well, something that was initially anticipated to have about a 15-year payback is looking like it's going to be closer to 8 to 9. So hoping that this district could close out in the early 2030s instead of going full term. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions the board may have. Otherwise, I'll turn it over to City Administrator Vickers.
Thank you. Jerry, any questions? Connie, any questions?
We would just like to encourage affordable housing in any of the TID districts that were mentioned. I didn't see much in the way of that. So that's the only statements that we have.
I appreciate that. Dr. Mark?
No questions. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. All right, Andrew.
Yeah, and then just to kind of address Tina's remarks there, and they were courteous enough to provide those sentiments before. As Alderman Gale knows, our strategic discussions do revolve around future closure of these districts and the ability to use your 1-year revenue extension essentially to attract and have a fund, develop a fund for workforce housing. So although not principal to the TIF amendments throughout the next several meetings that we'll have, we are certainly gearing up for that, and we will have those discussions during our next strategic action plan in terms of what affordable housing, workforce housing, attainable housing, enter other word for that kind of housing that's out there. We will be having those strategic discussions as a stakeholder group and a community. So,
And Andrew mentioned the fact that we have active developers inquiring of.
yeah, there are a few projects in the works now that which we're looking to partner on, and certainly we don't necessarily have a mechanism now, but with that TIF closure 1-year extension of revenue collection for workforce housing, that's something we're definitely interested in. Also interested in using potentially some of the ARPA dollars and or the proceeds from the Lakeshore Commons project out on the lakefront, which we can talk about a little bit to affect the same. So now that we have,
Andrew, 1 second.
Sorry, can I just add something to that too? We would, at MATC, we would definitely support some more affordable housing. The Oak Creek campus is the fastest growing campus, as you can well imagine.
That's
and
great.
we have athletics there, and we're moving the paramedic program, so we will be attracting students from out of district. And so it would be beneficial to us to have student housing available as well too. That's something we'd be interested in chatting with you about.
sure. We do revere, we do discuss the desire and goals we have as a community to have a housing option for anybody who wants to be part of this community. We are just in the formulative stages of putting a plan in place to really put that into action. So great comments. So now that Max has provided kind of the inventory of where we currently sit with our active tax increment districts, my job is to cheerlead these amendments. And what we'd like to do is talk a little bit about, on a higher level, about what our general goals are with these TID amendments. So I'll speak at a little bit of a higher level, and then we'll turn it over to our consultant team of Scott Harrington and Jackie Mitch with Vandewaal to go through the more detailed itemization of kind of, okay, this is the exact amendment in this project plan that you will ultimately vote on after the Plan Commission and the Common Council also vote on those same amendments. So number one, what are we doing? Again, a general level, we really tried and strived to update the current and past project costs with what we know has transpired since they were created. So we kind of updated the financial record here, and of course, left, as put down in number 3, left some additional project plan capacity for future development partnerships and opportunities that haven't yet presented themselves. We also wanted to make sure to capture, really the crux of it is identify and capture excess increment from our overachieving TIDs. Max told a really great story. We have a very great financial picture with universally all of our tax increment districts right now. And what we're looking to do is parlay that success and do some additional project costs, which we'll talk about on the next slide. But really the crux of this thing is capitalizing the aspirational goals that we have for the lakefront. The continued remediation from an environmental standpoint, the continued redevelopment, public-private partnership standpoint, and perhaps most importantly, I think for the public, is more park-like public amenities to draw the public to the lakefront for their benefit and use of that huge asset in our community. And of course, we're employing this TIF donation strategy to the lakefront with an eye towards closing our districts as early as possible. Important for this JRB as a stakeholder group, none of the TIF donation strategies where we're looking at redirecting these additional increments or excess increments to the lakefront cause those districts to go full term. We are still targeting closing those districts early. Usually it's 1, 2, or 3 years, but in some cases, in the significant ones, like Amazon, those are several years early, despite what we're asking the JRB to approve over the next couple meetings. So what are the larger projects associated with our proposed amendments here? Aside from kind of the continued environmental cleanup, redevelopment, and public park development at the lakefront, which is obviously the crux of this thing. The city is also looking at acquiring land. Traditionally, it's not been something we've put in our economic development portfolio in terms of being a developer of our own properties. Usually those are public-private partnerships. However, opportunities have presented themselves and we really want to strike. We are looking at, in the project plan amendments, purchasing an additional 14 and a half acres in Oakview Business Park. That's lot 1. That is the hard corner of Oakwood and Howell. Why are we getting into the business of owning property? Because the city wants to control and direct exactly what goes in on those prime pieces of choice pieces of real estate. We have seen a very successful turnaround in Oakview Business Park, but what we've also noticed is a business park that's very heavy in warehousing and logistics. And warehousing and logistics definitely have their place. Online commerce is never going to go away. I mean, it is definitely that is what the market is speaking to right now. But warehousing and logistics also don't provide the same impact in terms of jobs, wages, number of jobs, wages, or value density in terms of tax base as, say, a corporate headquarters or a manufacturing company would. So in Oakview Lot 1, as well as the potential partnership with the 25-acre farmstead to the south, we really are looking to have a 40-acre parcel of land in Milwaukee County that's attractive for a myriad of uses, but specific uses we would like to see there again are more of a corporate office, more of a manufacturing company versus the warehousing and logistics that are being absorbed all over the I-94 corridor for sure. So proposals and amendments to TID 8 accommodate project costs associated with those land acquisition strategies. Perhaps even more important, in larger tract of land, the city is under contract for purchasing 46 acres on the lakefront. And I think I can minimize this and we'll take just a visual tour of the lake. Just to familiarize yourself. Again. So here's our lakefront district. It's kind of large. I can't really capture it all. Bender Park, Milwaukee County, Lake Vista Park. You can see my cursor, correct? Yeah. All of this acreage around Lake Vista Park is subject to the Lakeshore Commons development, which has broken ground this week. We've transacted the property. All of phase 1 that's being developed was under city ownership. So we did sell that property and we will begin generating increment of that very unique development. And then we have all this junk in the middle. And that is going to be, again, kind of back here where we were on Lake Vista Park probably 10 years ago or so. Those redevelopment efforts start with working with the regulatory agencies to clean it up first. So there's project plan costs associated with the middle piece as well as the northern piece, which I'm going to zoom in here. The city of Oak Creek owns a parcel of about 23 acres that constitutes what we call the North Bluff here. You can kind of see the top of it here. There's like a walking trail here. The city already owns that. The property to the west is the former Peter Cooper glue factory. And of course, that is going to take some remediation effort, significant costs. And the present owner of the property, Wisp Park, who we've partnered with several times in this community, specifically on Oakview Business Park and Drexel Town Square, a great partner of ours, is essentially getting out of the land development business. And what we arrived at was there's about a $4 to $6 million price tag to remediate this property. Wisp Park said, we're not investing that kind of money in property. We're very comfortable kind of just letting it sit there until the city has available tax increment in its lakefront TID to pay for the remediation of the property. So in the end, the present property owner is saying, we're waiting for the TID mechanism to fund the cleanup, or we won't do anything with the property, and then we'll be there to redevelop it when the TID remediates it such that we can redevelop it. The city said, well, if the TID, the city, is spending all the money on the remediation. We just want to own the property so we can dictate what goes in there forever. So 46 acre swath of property, the city will, if all things go well here in the next several meetings, the city will own, will clean up, will then control the redevelopment outcome on that property. The North Bluff is really important because it represents a significant project cost that's a subject of your amendment, the amendments in the JRB and Common Council and Plan Commission approvals. The North Bluff property was a reclaimed property, was part of the former Peter Cooper property. It was contaminated as much as the rest of the property. And we acquired the property, I believe, in 2015 or 2016. I think it's 2015. It's about 23 acres. At that time, the investigation into the condition of the bluff yielded that we probably had a decently long runway, decade or two, before significant stabilization of the bluff needed to take place. Well, what had happened, I don't know the exact numbers, but the Lake Michigan water levels raised about several feet the last few years, way ahead of any geological time that we had anticipated, or probably a lot of very smart scientists had anticipated. So what we saw was the wave action eroding the bottom of the bluff, and the contaminated stuff on top of the bluff beginning to fall into the lake. So we have not only an ethical responsibility, but very likely in the end, compliance that we need to maintain to make sure that that doesn't happen and we can maintain the environmental integrity. Significant project costs. It's $12 million. It's this main frame of this amendment. And it's one of the reasons that we're employing this donation strategy, because there is no way that with the development of all of the other properties that are in our tax increment district, that there would ever be enough excess increment to tackle these types of costs, because these types of costs don't generate increment. So we have to address this, and we have to address it in a quick fashion. And the amendments provide the capital to do that. Now, when we're going to the community, when we're going to our stakeholders, what we really like to say is, yeah, we're spending $9 million. We're going to put big rocks at the base of the bluff, and the bluff will be good forever. But what we would rather do for a rather incremental cost to the overall project is say, hey, you know what? We're going to spend $12 or $13 million, and we're going to create one of the coolest park-like amenities to draw the public down to the lake and have some sort of, as one part of a larger picture, have a walking promenade along Lake Michigan. And we will wish to connect the park-like features from the North Bluff that we're speaking of now to Lake Vista Park, and then hopefully ultimately even down to Bender Park in Milwaukee County. Huge regional asset if we do it right. We have aspirational goals for the public and private development, but the park-like amenities we want will be visioned next year. The city council presumably this will prevail, but we've budgeted $80,000 to hire a consultant to produce that exact vision for the public amenities of the lake and the connectivity between north and south. So that's the true reason we are trying to employ this donation strategy to provide capital to the lakefront, because we have these obligations out here from an ethical standpoint on the environmental side of things, but also the public developments that we want to continue to open up the lake to the public. That we haven't found a developer that wants to take that on yet, just out of the goodness of their hearts. So we would be stuck with either the dilemma of the general taxpayers of the city of Oak Creek are going to pay for these improvements via their property tax levy, or we're going to garner and utilize the success the development community has had in generating this increment in all of our other tax increment districts. And we're going to have the developers help us fund this regional asset. That's the crux of why we're here the next couple meetings. And we're pretty passionate and excited about it. I don't know if that came through because, I'm also kind of a numbers guy in the end. So just to kind of underscore the plan, then we'll turn it over to the Vanderwall team to kind of go through the particulars on the amendments. The significant increase in costs, the basis of this amendment process is the lakefront. And you can see here, we'll come back to this slide. Scott will go through this slide a little bit later, but I hazard to say that the original TID project plan, and I meant to look this up, I think it was between $40 and $50 million of total project costs. Now, with all of this environmental work, with all of the partnership potentials that we have with Milwaukee County to help improve Bender Park and connect north and south via trail development, et cetera, extensions of Oakleaf, the project costs are $117 million. So we had to put pen to paper and figure out how the community was going to wrestle with these aspirational goals with associated aspirational costs. And we arrived at this amendment process over several months of analyzing it. So with that said, I will turn it over to you, Scott, and hand off. If we could go back to slideshow. Right here. Great, thank you.
Yeah, how about that? Okay.
There you go.
Hey, I can read little hieroglyphs here, the guy talking. Okay. Good morning, pleasure to be here. Scott Harrington with Vanderwall Associates. With me is my associate, Jackie Mitch. Been involved with Oak Creek TIFs now for a few years, creating TID 13 and TID 16, and happy to help the city out with the amendments here. As you saw in the packet and as Andrew described, there are 5 separate amendments that we're looking at here concurrently. Of those, 3 of them, one of the primary purposes is to make those donations to TID 13, the Lakefront TIF. One is to the Lakefront TIF to better reflect what the actual costs are. That, Andrew, to answer your question, the original spending plan for TID 13 was only $36 million. So as those costs have come in and been better understood, those have grown significantly. And then lastly, with TID 7, near the end of its life, a couple of projects need to be finished up. So that's the one district that really doesn't reflect what's going on with the other ones. I know TID plans in general aren't very exciting to read. And when you have 5 of them that look all pretty much the same, I'm sure it was a little bit of a struggle getting through that. But hopefully, we tried to kind of format the plans to show the interconnection, but at the same time, those documents can stand alone because going into the future, they'll be looked at independently, and we wanted to make sure there was enough information in there that people could understand what was happening, both in the context of all 5 of these being done together, but at the same time, each document being clear about what it specifically was doing because they'll be implemented separately. So I'm just going to kind of quickly walk through the essence of each of the amendments, and then I'm happy to get into any specifics on any one. So we'll start with TID 7, or the 27th Street Corridor. This TID is nearing the end of its life. There's an additional 950 in new capital improvements that are within 1/2 mile of the district boundary. I think, as most of you are aware, that TID law permits that, subject to approval by the Joint Review Board, to expend funds outside of the district. In this case, the improvements are going to be made in a subdivision that's completely surrounded by the district. So if you recall the map from TID 7, there are kind of 2 holes in it. This is one of them. And making these improvements on streets in a park really do benefit the entire district, given that you've got to drive through the district to get to it and that they're all interconnected. The previously authorized level of spending is enough to absorb this cost. So we're not seeking to increase the level of spending that the Joint Review Board approved when this district was initially created. And we're still looking at the potential of closing this district possibly 2 to 3 years early with this last expenditure. TID 8, Oakview Business Park. Here we're increasing the level of expenditures for capital improvements and land acquisition, but a lot of that was just the success of this district and the agreements that have gone with it. Need to really increase the spending plan just to sort of catch up, if you will, with what has kind of already occurred. In this case, too, looking to donate over time up to $6.8 million to TID 13. But even with that, as Andrew kind of pointed out, this district could still close possibly up to 6 years early. So even with the donation and kind of recalibrating our spending plan, still able to close this district early as well. TID 10, the master lock, not looking to increase the level of spending that was originally authorized, but to donate $3.6 million to TID number 13. This district actually has a pretty hefty fund balance, as Max pointed out, by the end of this year, probably close to $1 million. So while the other donations would be kind of on an annual basis over time as those surpluses are accumulated, this district actually would make a sort of a one-time donation of that fund balance and then contribute the other roughly $2.6 million over the next few years, and still looking at closing this district 2 to 3 years early.
That one-time sweep, if you will, of the TID 10 fund balance into TID 13 is actually the funding source for the acquisition of the Peter Cooper property. That covers that expense. So that's a transaction that can occur if these amendments are approved. It will occur at the end of this year or early first quarter 2022.
TID 13, as Andrew covered, is really the recipient of all these donated funds, and I think he laid out a pretty strong case of what the needs in that district are, and again, from when that district was created to what's transpired since then, and a real understanding of the costs, as well as the potential at hand. It's a pretty significant increase in the overall level of spending that would be permitted. With the development potential that's there, we could still be looking at, and this is the only blighted district of the 5 that we're talking about. I should point that out too, that all the other 4 are mixed use districts with 20-year lives. This was a blighted district with a 27-year life, because redevelopment of this type is much more of a challenge and often takes longer terms to kind of finance things. But if all the development occurs that where that potential is there, could be looking at a fund balance of up to $18 million when it closes, which means that it potentially could close early. But the real issue is, as the city is laid out, as a cash flow issue, that we have a lot of upfront expenditures that we need to incur to really get this property ready to meet that potential, as well as to provide the public amenities that are included within it as well. And then, again, this is the list of those capital expenditures. As you saw in the document, there are kind of 5 bond issuances that are planned out. And the initial bond issuances are really supported primarily with the donations. Hopefully over time, then we start to see increment develop that would support the other ones. And then lastly, TID number 16, the Amazon TIF. Again, need to kind of recalibrate our expenditures based on the tremendous growth that has occurred there and the resulting agreements and other needs for it. So the 22 million is primarily an adjustment to kind of catch up, if you will. And then be able to donate up to $12 million to TID 13. But even with that, could still look at closing this district at 6 years or more early, rather than taking it to that full term. So all of these districts still have that potential and are projected to close early, anywhere from 2 to 6+ years, even with these changes in the spending and with the donations. Just wanted to kind of cover the schedule, and as the Joint Review Board members know that this is just the initial meeting, but we'd like to kind of provide a real thorough overview because we certainly want to get any thoughts or comments that you have about what you're seeing so that when we do come back for that final meeting, tentatively scheduled for the 17th or thereabouts, that you have the information that you need and are, ready to take action. The Plan Commission public hearing will be on October 26th. And then the Common Council is expected to take action on November 16th. Because we don't include a boundary amendment here, we can then immediately transmit this to the state and probably receive certification potentially, by the end of the year. The city can move forward with whatever gets approved at the end, even without that certification, but should have confirmation by the Department of Revenue probably by December or, early January, I would think at the latest. So we can move this along pretty quickly. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions, as I'm sure the city staff is.
I just have a question on TID 13. I got what you're talking about, making it public trails and all that great stuff. I love Lake Vista Park, by the way. But did you talk about what other development you're thinking might occur in that area, or is that still too far in the future to really know?
Yeah, sure. I can speak a little bit to that. I think many of us could. Well, I hope I didn't minimize the lakefront, but
Yeah, I'm just curious about, business development or housing, that sort of thing.
sure. So there's a better graphic of this, a little more visually appealing in your documents, and we can talk more on that at the final meeting. But again, I spoke to that North Bluff area. That's what we refer to as the North Bluff here, where my cursor is. That is the really combining the city's 23 acres on the bluff with the 46 remnant acres of the former Peter Cooper property. We don't know what exactly that should be from a redevelopment standpoint, whether that's residential, whether that's some sort of niche research and industry or something along those lines. The success of the Lakeshore Commons project, which is currently underway, which is right around the Lake Vista Park, might help inform, hey, we really need to remediate Peter Cooper to an environmental standard that allows for some sort of multifamily residential uses. In the end, though, I think that's a mixed use development of some sort there that has some commercial, some employment, and some housing elements. Similar to the middle properties, which we refer to as the Beezer and Quinnell property. Right now, those properties are, basically being inundated with Department of Justice and DNR requests to get a remedial action plan for those properties. I doubt very much the city would come into ownership of those eventually. Maybe it's more of a partnership on getting it cleaned up and the city helping steer the redevelopment of that, but that's really unknown at this time, Dr. Mark. Of course, we have the Lakeshore Commons around Lake Vista. And one of the significant project plan costs in the amendment, it's not subject of the amendment, it was actually in the original, so we have Lake Vista, then we have Bender Park, and then we have this piece of open ground here that's under control of a developer, and they would like to do a more traditional single family subdivision in that area. We had begun discussions with the county on potentially, just from a land use perspective, swapping a piece of Bender Park with this piece so we could develop adjacent to what we're doing in Lakeshore Commons. For many reasons, that really was going to be a protracted and head banging process. So we thought, well, we'll just partner with the county on connecting the two, and that's some of the project plan costs that you see in terms of extending the Oak Leaf Trail to connect. But this single family development to the south does represent, a pretty significant single family plat potential. However, we have about a $3.5 million sewer pipe to get there, traversing Bender Park property, which we've initiated the process to partner with the county on that. And then there's some additional developments. I think we call this the lake, the mixed use lakefront gateway, kind of the front doorstep of 32 and Ryan Road. There's certainly some mixed use potential there, maybe some multifamily housing. Probably not a great location for affordable housing, given its lack of proximity to employment and transit and things like that. But that's certainly something we've had discussions with developers on in that area as well. So that's kind of the rundown of the lake. You know, we have some mixed use development that's going on now. Very likely some mixed use development in the future as we vision it on the lakefront, and then some single family development south of Bender Park.
Sounds good. Thank you. I just want to mention too, I really appreciated this summary. It was very, very helpful and informative, but I do have one question. Is this going to be on the final? So
Yes. If you vote yes, we'll give you an A. Let's just put it that way.
Ken, if I may, I have a question.
Jerry.
What I'm curious about is, because of the 12% rule, we talked about in the initial remarks here that TIF is the only development tool really available to us. And as I understand this now, we're going to be taking TIF off the board for perhaps the next 8 years as a development tool because we're exceeding the 12%. I'm wondering how council and staff feel about losing that tool for a period of time.
So, you know, it's my job to be positive about things here. So we look at this as an opportunity, and Jerry, we've arrived at this being a potential benefit. You know, the 12% test is a fictitious thing that one legislature came up with. It could be 18%, it could be 25%, there could be no cap. But I think it's just a statement that we want to have some sort of a cap on the amount of value, overall community value that's captured in a TID, because we do have service delivery needs in these tax increment districts that, you know, we have to come up with in the meantime. But regarding the 12% test, we're just the victim of our own success. I mean, if you look and you take the $172 million of Amazon valuation that came on the books in the last 24 months, we're way below the 12%, and we wouldn't be having this conversation. However, Jerry, the more direct answer to your question, it's a good way for the city to control its growth, which we haven't, we haven't been able to harness that. The market's hot. Oak Creek is where we're at. Certainly we want to take a proactive approach in guiding our growth, but the ability to not create new tax increment districts or expand boundaries of current districts that we have can also be a way to help control our growth, because what we'll see is developers will not be able to sharpen. They'll be able to sharpen their pencil a little more, and we'll see that developments happen more without the use of TIF assistance. So we will see that, but also it's not the easy button. We can't go to the next 20-acre swath of greenfield development and do a development there with a tax increment district because the developers say that he or she needs one. So I think it could be a good way to control our growth. The reason we're asking so much of the Joint Review Board, the Common Council, and the Plan Commission is knowing that we are capped at our 12% and can't do new districts. We got to make hay with what we have, and we have plenty of work and of available development acreage in the existing tax increment districts we have, and we're comfortable with that.
Thank you.
Anything from the county?
Nothing from the county.
I'd just like to add one more comment and just file it in the interesting category. One of the things that really strikes me about Oak Creek is the diversity here, in particularly the number of immigrants we have, an international community, the very strong Muslim community in the area, the Albanians, the Sikh. I mean, I just think that's really something special about this town, this area. I can tell you at MATC's Oak Creek campus, we have more ESL students, English as a second language, than they do downtown.
Wow.
And I think if there's ways to, as you're doing these developments, to celebrate that, I don't know what exactly that would look like, but maybe in the parks areas and stuff to have some informational signs or tributes to some of the various immigrant groups that have really added to the character and quality of this community. I think that would be phenomenal.
Good, thank you. I know Dr. Mark, the city just had a multicultural event, or cafe event, it was 2 weeks ago, and celebrating our diversity. And I know Andy can attest to the fact that, and Andrew with kids in the school, my kids, but it's really just extreme amount of diverse cultures that are represented in the school district. It's really amazing.
They bring so much energy, and we know there's a shortage of workers, and you hate to stereotype, but generally they came here to get a better life, and they're willing to do the work and to make, so it provides a great workforce as well too. So I just think it's pretty unique. It's pretty special.
I don't think we're known for that.
No,
That's something
no.
we need to, we do celebrate that. I mean,
Right.
We can definitely find some more strategic ways to celebrate that, because it's selfishly, I mean, it's great for community fabric in general, but it's also a significant economic development driver. It's very important and attractive for outside investment in our community as well to see those types of that diversity.
Definitely.
Anything else on the floor? Gary? We have an item called other businesses allowed by law, but
So this was just informational. We don't need any kind of
Informational, yeah.
motion. Okay. thank
nothing else is agendized, unless anyone else has anything else to add. We'll discuss our next date and time of meeting. Carrie, I understand there's a suggested time for the next JRB meeting to review these.
So as was previously mentioned, we were asking folks to hold November 17th as the next JRB
What day of the
meeting.
week is that, Carrie?
I believe that's a
Wednesday.
Wednesday. That's following the Common Council's action on the proposed TID amendments. So if that works, we would probably be looking for a same time if that works for everybody, 9:30. We would ask that people put that on their calendars because that is a voting meeting. So we do need to have a quorum of the board available for that time.
Is timing imperative there? Is that just, would be nice to get it done there?
Yes.
Both?
I mean, we can, this, we have an absolute stacked deck of land under contract and things and timelines that really need to be met. So it was very encouraging to see all 5 members here today. Sometimes we're always like, oh, are we going to get the full complement of folks, of stakeholders? So yes, if there is a conflict for the 17th, please let us know immediately so we can move around that.
But so we'd encourage members that have questions, concerns on the outside to contact staff and work through those with you and Van Wall.
Absolutely. Yep.
Anything else? Other than that, we'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
Cromie seconds.
Roll call, Gale is aye.
Cromie, aye.
Dr. Mark, aye.
County,
Cameron,
aye.
aye.
Great. Thank you for those on Zoom. Jerry, enjoy your vacation.
Before we all leave, can I just make a quick announcement? So next Wednesday, October 27th, from 1 to 4, the Oak Creek campus will be hosting a job fair in partnership with the city of Oak Creek. We're also going to be doing a drop-in vaccination clinic, which Oak Creek Health is doing for us. So spread the word. It's open to the public. I think we've maxed out our employers, but we might be able to squeeze a couple more in. So just wanted to really help get the word out. We know we need employees, right?
All right, thank you all. Tina, take care. Jerry, take care.